This is Gray Mars, and welcome to High News. Singapore is set to resume executions for the first time in 6 months on Wednesday, with a 46-year-old man facing the gallows in a case that has reignited criticism of the city-state's use of the death penalty. Singaporean national Ngurul Sapaya was sentenced to death in 2018 for abetting the attempted trafficking of just more than a kilogram of cannabis. A judge found that he was using a phone number that was communicating with traffickers who were attempting to smuggle the drugs into Singapore. Targahu's family and anti-death penalty campaigners have attacked the authorities handling up the case, claiming that the defendant was not provided with adequate level of counsel. They also say Taragori was denied access to a Tamil interpreter while he was being questioned by the police. Taragori says English is not that good. He wanted an interpreter, but he couldn't get one. Then he was really disadvantaged because he can't properly understand the police statement that was read back to him. How can he make any amendments, according to activist Kristen Hahn? It really disadvantages people who might not have the language skills or the education level to advocate for themselves in that situation, when they don't have lawyers who are looking out for their interests. This is a very sad story. Taragori's family have desperately tried to halt the impending execution, delivering dozens of letters to Singapore's President Halimah Yacob asking her for clemency. They have yet to receive a response from the president or her staff. Prominent campaigners, including British billionaire Richard Branson, have also pleaded for the execution to be halted. But the clock ticks down towards the scheduled hanging on Wednesday. The authorities appear unwilling to listen to any last-ditch appeals. They took his height and weight to measure the rope for execution, Tagori's sister Ladaveta says. He told us that he will be taken to visit the execution chamber so that they can explain to him how things will happen and where he will be standing and things like that. That was obviously very difficult to listen to. With execution potentially just a matter of hours away, Laveta says her brother remains confident that there will be justice and is in good spirits. Targo was first detained by police in 2014 for drug consumption and failing to report for a urine test. Lavati says he started using drugs after being offered them by older friends in his neighborhood. He was never given any support or tools to understand or cope with his habits or find any help for his dependence on drugs, she said. He never received counseling or therapy or even education about drugs. He's only been punished his whole life. While on remand in 2014, police investigated Tagori for suspected links to a cannabis trafficking case from the previous year involving two smugglers. He was not arrested with the drugs. He was not even on the scene. He was basically tied to the case after the fact. They arrested those two other guys in September 2013, said Hahn. Those caught with the drugs were not charged with capital crimes. Taragori was eventually found guilty of conspiring to traffic cannabis after the court ruled that he was linked to the traffickers through a phone number that the prosecution said belonged to him. He appealed his conviction in 2019, but the case was dismissed by Singapore's Court of Appeal. Taragori unsuccessfully filed an application for his case to be reviewed late last year. He had to represent himself in court as he could not find a lawyer to take on his case. Access to counsel has to start from the moment a police investigation is commenced until the moment a person has been escorted to the gallows, said Sarah Cowell, vice president of the Capital Punishment Justice Project. We have real fair trial concerns in this case, in terms of access to counsel, access to interpreters, and just even the nature of the case charge itself. If you're going to have the death penalty, you also have to have the highest standard of fair trial rights and not be afraid of extreme rigor and review being applied to it. The United Nations has said that those countries that do not retain the death penalty should use that only for the most serious of crimes, and drug offenses do not meet that threshold. In an online statement, Singapore's Central Narcotics Bureau said Taragori was accorded full due process under the law and had access to legal counsel through the process. Taragori's hanging is set to be the first in Singapore this year. Local campaign group the Transformative Justice Collective said the country hanged 11 people for drug offenses in 2022. One of those killed was Malaysian national Nagari Darmalingam, with his case attracting international attention as he was found to have an IQ of 69, suggesting an intellectual disability. Singapore's unwavering commitment to its zero-tolerance stance on drugs is in stark contrast to some nearby countries that have eased policies around drugs. Last year, Thailand removed cannabis from its banned list of narcotics, legalizing the growing and possession of the drug. Earlier this month, Malaysian legislators approved legal reforms to abolish the mandatory death penalty for serious offenses, including drug trafficking. Singapore, however, shows no signs of letting up. Minister for Home Affairs and Minister for Law, Kay Shugham, explained the reasoning for his country's tough drug rules to Malaysian media this year. If we are not tough in Singapore, we will be flooded with drugs. Look at the countries in the region and the impact of drugs on them. You don't even need to guess what the result would be. If we are not tough, he said. But as Tarragori sits down for his final meal ahead of his execution at Shanghai prison, campaigners like Han maintain that Singapore's hardline drug policies have done little to tackle the root of the problem. It just shows that the focus is really on punishment and delivering pain. It's not about harm, it's not looking at harm and who is harmed by this, and how do we keep people safe. It's just punishment. Anyone who's involved or linked to drugs in any way needs to be punished. That's the overriding principle of Singapore's war on drugs. Thank you for tuning in to Great Mars. Please like, share, and subscribe.